Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great Monday as we continue to celebrate all the people who are working so hard to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, we're going to be joined in just a second by Tom Mohrman, who's the Marine Program Manager for Mississippi for the Nature Conservancy. But before we do that, I want to invite my producer and my partner in crime, Kyle Curley, into the conversation for a second. And first of all, just say good morning to Kyle. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. We had, for the Facebook and YouTube and SuperTalk TV audience, Kyle's got a beautiful camera shot, but he had some issues with the Skype this morning. So we'll enjoy looking at him while we got the opportunity to do that. But Kyle, you've been busy. You've been busy lately, haven't you, my friend?
It has been a really busy time, and it usually is about this time of the year. One baseball season winds down, or one sport, hockey ends, baseball starts in the middle of my son playing baseball. And yeah, it's just nonstop. And then we get weather like we've had last night, knocking power out here and there, and different systems going offline, and still having problems this morning that we're, finding out about. But, it is what it is, and we just roll with it. That's what we do.
So, yeah, we're pre-recording this show for Monday, so that explains the power outages. But, hey, listen, Kyle, we talked last Wednesday about hurricane season approaching, and one of the things that I'll remind people is that SuperTalk is all about local programming. So if you really want to keep up what's happening on the tropical front, whether it's before or after a storm, just tune in to SuperTalk Mississippi here on the coast. You'll be glad you did. Cal and his team will be doing regular updates about what to expect, closures, all kinds of stuff like that. But SuperTalk has always played a huge role in sort of the hurricane prep and hurricane situation in coastal Mississippi, hasn't it, Kyle?
Yeah, we've always taken pride in our hurricane coverage, if you will, for a group of radio guys that no matter which variation of staffing that we've had, we've always had a few people in the building that were really keen on watching storms and watching the wind currents and where it might go. And then you have someone like myself that I was kind of thinking about this earlier. I follow it, and I got my eye on what's in the Atlantic or in the Caribbean, whatnot. I don't really get into any type of go mode until it gets into the Gulf. It's almost like I treat myself as a hired gun in my own building, because that's when I really start to kick in with things as far as, if it's coming towards us, either Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, if it's going to be remotely in our area, we go wall to wall and we do coverage every time there's a new update. And that means you're living life every 3 to 4 hours at a time. And that's just the way it is. And we've always done it that way. I think it's almost conditioned in my brain that's, you take a nap in between updates.
It's interesting. We're in a way, we're all kind of conditioned to be like that. But SuperTalk Mississippi is going to do that and do that well. As we discussed last week, we actually went through all of the major storm predicting agencies and listed out what they're expecting. But it's going to be a hyperactive active season. Frankly, there's not a single major source that says it won't be hyperactive. You're seeing headlines that say explosive season. And because of the way this thing is setting up, they're expecting it to be a very busy Caribbean and Gulf season, unfortunately. And, the main thing is, as the Colorado State University folks said, all it takes is one. In fact, I'll just read it directly. As with all hurricane seasons, coastal residents are reminded that it only takes one hurricane making landfall to make it an active season. Thorough preparation should be made every season, regardless of predicted activity. It's such a quiet season last year for us, Kyle, and a lot of new people in the community, a lot of new people that really need to kind of lock on to this is part of living here, preparation, don't wait to the last minute, all those stories.
Yeah, and, have to catch myself when I'm talking to people that are relatively new to the coast, and if they ask me my opinion of what the hurricane season's going to be, and I always kind of throw my opinion in with, almost like a grain of salt. I don't worry about it again until it's maybe 4 or 5 days out and it looks like it's coming right for us, and then it's go, 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 go. But the flip side of that is, in the back of my mind, you really have to be prepared. You've got to have your own stuff in a row, your whatever preparational items that you might need to last, and that's what I try and say. You're going to need water. You're going to want toilet paper. You're going to want some kind of wipe just to cool yourself down in the event that you've lost power for days. So, don't skimp on the preparations, but don't go crazy on it as well, because some of this stuff's only going to last. There's a shelf life on some of it, but be prepared, but also keep an eye on where things are going. And
I would encourage people, especially people new to the community, to go watch that conversation I had with Stephen McCraney, the executive director of MEMA here in Mississippi, where we really detail what storm prep looks like. And we talked a lot about the season and MEMA's preparations, et cetera. Go back and take a look at that. I think it will help you prepare. Anything else, my friend?
Not off the top of my head, no. Kind of like I was saying earlier, I haven't gotten there yet. I know it's, middle of May, and there's been some talk at work about what we need to do. And there's a few projects that we need to get checked on before we get active into hurricane season. And those preparations are underway. But, personally, myself, I haven't gotten that far yet. But my mind's on it. I know what the Colorado State people say, and I know how the news will bring it and make it sound, and I'm not trying to downplay it at all. But at the same time, I'm going to wait till it crosses that path between the old Cuba and Florida and see what happens.
I'm with you, man. You know me, I've watched it closely, but I've actually been able to keep my head away from it. I've not really thought much about it. So as the season approaches and the Hurricane Center starts, issuing their hurricane outlook, they do that 2 weeks prior to the season starting. It's hard, you got to get in that mode. Just got to get in that mode, and we'll use our platform to remind people, and especially teach new people who are new to this community why they have to pay closer attention. And this is kind of part of living here. So anyway, thanks, my friend. Thanks for all your support.
You bet. Not a problem. Hopefully we'll have a less active Mississippi Gulf Coast season than anyone else.
Yeah, man, I hope so. I hope so. Didn't have to move boats one time last year, man. That'll spoil you. That will definitely spoil you.
But that's how it happens, though. You get one or two seasons where you don't have to do anything, and then your guard's down, and next thing you know, you've got one knocking at the back door.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so we'll shift gears. Listen, I had a great conversation with Ricky Flint recently. Ricky is the executive director for the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund here in Mississippi, something we worked hard for a couple of years to get. We got 10 million the first year, 15 the second year, and we got 12 million allocated this year. And the big selling point was the opportunity to have this fund gives us a chance to draw down a lot of matching funds. And the matching fund component of the programs that have been funded so far for the program now, again, going into year 3 has been really, really good. It's everything we hoped it would be, and it just gets better, actually, as we go forward. Because we have organizations to work with like Wildlife Mississippi, the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, a long list of folks who can go out and sort of canvass the United States where they have similar trust funds and where are they getting their matching funds from. We can learn from them. There are a lot of best practices like Georgia, for example, and we're really tapped into that, and Mississippi's off to a good start. One of the things that Ricky and I talked about was a 35-acre oyster reef that was done off of Bay St. Louis, where part of the funding that came for that project came from the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. And we thought this might be a good opportunity for us to invite the Marine Program Manager for Mississippi, Tom Mohrman, with the Nature Conservancy, to not just talk about that one. We can also update you on a number of other projects that are going on, remind you why the Nature Conservancy is such an important partner for conservation community in the state of Mississippi, and so on. So without any further ado, let me welcome Tom back to the Ricky Matthews Show. Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show again.
Good. Hey, just real quick, just kind of give people a sense of what your job is.
Yeah, so I'm the director of the Mississippi Coastal Program. So I work primarily in the estuary here, south or north of Mississippi Sound, partly in the three coastal counties, but my focus is mostly saltwater in the bays and bayous of the Mississippi coast.
And there's a lot there, man. I mean, one of the things I often talk about is, how special the Mississippi Sound is, this semi-enclosed body of water, this estuarian complex. Places like the Pascagoula River, largest undammed waterway in the continental United States. I mean, there's a lot to be proud of here in coastal Mississippi. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll get into some details with Tom Mohrman from the Nature Conservancy about what's going on with the Nature Conservancy in Mississippi these days. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We have Tom Mohrman, who's the Marine Program Manager for Mississippi for the Nature Conservancy, someone who's been on the show before. I've been honored to have the opportunity to work with key leadership at Nature Conservancy for a number of years. Back when I was at the Sun Herald, always supported their efforts, but more recently in this show and the outdoor show that I've had the opportunity to work with key leaders. And the Nature Conservancy plays such a critical role in the state, very respected organization that is doing important work all across the United States, but certainly here in Mississippi. Tom, why don't we do this? We'll give people kind of a snapshot of what the Nature Conservancy is, people who really don't know and have not really focused on it before. We'll come back to it in a little bit and talk more about efforts in the Gulf region, even beyond Mississippi. But how do you talk about the Nature Conservancy to people who don't know much about it?
Well, the first thing we like to let people know is that we're a nonprofit organization. Sometimes we get confused with either federal or state agencies, but we're not. We're supported by our membership and our corporate and local sponsors. So we're mostly funded through people who give to our organization, who like the work that we do. But my program, for example, goes out and seeks federal and state funding opportunities. So we try to leverage those resources that we get locally and try to make them into bigger and better projects.
Yeah, so look, I think what we can do is use the recent 35-acre oyster reef creation that happened off of Bay St. Louis. We'll use it as an example because multiple funding sources, some really cool technology that you guys were utilizing to actually lay those reefs down. So we'll start with that, and then we'll kind of build off of that. But it really was a cool program, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I definitely enjoy working for the Nature Conservancy. I've been in this position for 13 years, and it gives me an opportunity to get out on the water to try to build some habitat in places where it's either been lost or hasn't been before.
Yeah, so let's get to the 35-acre reef. Let's talk first of all. How do you make plans to do something like this? How do you seek money? Where did the money come from? It was really named in the honor of someone important, part of history for Bay St. Louis. We'll come to that as well. And then we'll talk about the technology that we used to actually create it, which was very unique. So kind of start from the beginning. Who dreams this up and how does it come to fruition?
Sure. Well, this particular project was actually started about 12 years ago. My predecessors developed this project along with the Department of Marine Resources. They got together and looked at some maps and kind of figured out where the best places for potential restoration of oyster reefs would be. We were looking at multiple benefits, so we wanted to enhance recreational fisheries while also helping to support oysters in Mississippi. The most recent iteration of this project, we received an award from the NIFWIF 5-star program back in 2018. And this was just a small test area. So we used some limestone, put out a very thin placement of that culture material to see how it would respond. And
Hey, Tom, before you get too far, let's mention this real quick. Mm-hmm. This is critical because we had the opening of the Bonnet-Carré spillway a couple of times in 1 year that really just devastated the oil the oyster industry in coastal Mississippi. And of course, we had the BP oil spill as well. But you're building off of a really, really challenged moment for the oyster industry in building these, aren't you?
Yeah, well, when we first started working with oysters, it was after the BP oil spill, but before the most recent openings of the Bonacary. So we were looking at ways to support oysters throughout the Gulf of Mexico, not only in Mississippi, but in our neighboring states as well. So the Nature Conservancy in all those different states from Texas to Florida started investing in staff and resources to build up oyster resources across the Gulf.
Yeah, well, that's good. So anyway, getting back to the vision for this developed and take it from there.
Yeah, so we did a small, what we would call a subtidal reef culch plant. So that's putting material on the seafloor and basically creating a surface area for new oysters to attach. And from that very small project, we were able to see some oysters attached to the limestone that we put in the water. We suffered the same fate as all the other oysters in the bay when the Bonacary opened, and subsequently in 2019, I believe it was a very rainy spring as well. So, we suffered a little bit from that on that project, but it was enough to get us some funding through some other sources. So we saw what we liked, at least initially, and took that information to create some other larger projects. So we went from basically a 5-acre, very thin layer of culch material to develop that into a much more complicated and complex project. The 35 acres we're working on right now started initially from a 20-acre project, and we were able to leverage funds from multiple sources to get that up to about 35 acres.
Wow. And then funding sources began to be a challenge and something you really worked hard to get.
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate, actually. We were able to get funding from the Mississippi Tidelands Program, the NIFWIF Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund, and that program is related directly to oil spill penalties, and also the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund.
Yeah, so the combination of those, and that's one of the things, again, one of the great things about Mississippi having the trust fund is it gives us an opportunity to be a player where you can turn $1 into, in this case, I don't know how many dollars, $4 or $5 What's the total project cost for this 35-acre oyster reef?
With all funding components, it's about $5.5 million.
Yeah, well, that's great. So, by the way, it was named in honor of. Give a sense of that.
So the Mississippi Commission on Marine Resources, or the Advisory Commission on Marine Resources, named it in honor of Tony Trapani, who's a local restaurateur and very avid recreational fisherman who passed away last year. So the CMR had a meeting where they brought in some folks from the family and named it in honor of him.
Yeah, Trapani's. Most people know that, especially longtime coast residents know that name extremely well. So, okay, what was interesting, I actually saw some videos from laying the most recent piles of limestone that Ricky Flint posted. You had some good participation from a wide range of folks that came out and observed that. Nice organization in putting all that together. But you explained it was very precise, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we're building this oyster reef a little bit different than you would say for a commercial harvest. When you're building oysters or restoring oysters for harvest, you want to put out a thin layer of material that's flat, so it's easy to harvest. You want your dredges to be able to pick it up, and you want your oyster tongers to be able to handle that material easily. We're trying to create a habitat, so we want to add a three-dimensional structure to it. So this is partly why this project is a little bit more expensive than you would for a commercial reef project. But essentially, instead of broadcasting material out, traditionally it's done with water cannons. And it just kind of sprays that material out in an even layer. We're creating a series of mounds or pods. So we can't just do that with a water cannon. We're using a 3-ton bucket attached to a track hoe. And this track hoe is equipped with a GPS unit on the actual bucket. the operator who's in the cab has a iPad in his hand that's telling him real time his placement. So the placement of these pods is very particular in order to keep a standard vertical height, but also there's essentially this very large grid. Currently, we've put down 12,800 pods. There's probably going to be around 15 or 16,000 when we're finished. So you got to make sure they're evenly spaced. Basically, from center point to center point, it's about 10 feet apart from each one. And there's about 100 transects that are running across laterally in our permitted area. So all this complexity relies on exact placement of that material. And we've been very fortunate when working with the contractors that we picked for this project, and it's been going great. There's also some quality control measures after the rock is deployed, where a second company comes and surveys, gives us an idea of where all that material is as far as height goes. So we've got several lines of information coming in to tell us where that material is actually being placed.
So, Tom, how deep is the water?
So it's probably doesn't get any deeper than 6 foot in the deepest part. We're trying to create approximately 1.5 feet of average vertical height over the project area. So there is, it's a muddy bottom. Yeah. In some places there's 6 inches of mud, some places it's a foot. So that was a part of our permit applications. We needed to map all that out. And over that 35-acre area, it's going to be deeper with mud in some places than others. So not every pod is going to be exactly the same height.
When we get on the other side, we'll continue our conversation about this 35-acre oyster reef off of Bay St. Louis, and we'll also get into some of the other programs that they're involved in when we continue our conversation with Tom Mohrman with the Nature Conservancy. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have Tom Mohrman, who's the Marine Program Manager for Mississippi for the Nature Conservancy. You know, Tom, when you think about building reefs, and you know the story of Alabama, when you look on my GPS, and I've got a lot of private numbers and I've got public numbers, hundreds of fishing reefs off of Mississippi. But when we think about fishing reefs, we think about a big barge going out and just dumping a bunch of concrete or maybe some pre-prepared devices or whatever. You don't think of what you're doing, where you're doing this in Bay St. Louis, where it's just very precise placement of limestone. You mentioned you guys had a really good relationship with your contractor, but it is a very precise, GPS-oriented technology that you're using. How precise is it?
They can get within a couple inches of the center point of these different pods that they're putting in.
Wow, so, a couple of inches.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, really and truly. I was not aware of the level of precision that could be achieved until we actually started deploying, and I am very impressed with that. So.
And what's interesting about that is you're talking about, this is big equipment. You're big equipment. You're moving around, barges, and then of course the device you're using to actually distribute the limestone. But that's pretty amazing that big equipment can get that precise.
No, it definitely requires a skilled operator. And, the guys running that machinery, they're putting in thousands of these things. So they, I can't imagine how their brains are able to process all of what they're seeing with their hand-eye coordination and, the iPad in front of them and being able to manipulate that equipment so precisely. It's really pretty cool.
It is, and of course the wonders of modern technology to go along with that. I mentioned when we're off the break, what do you anticipate when tropical systems come through? Will it spread out the limestone, or what's y'all's thoughts about that?
Well, it's a very hard thing to predict, but we're hopeful that this rock is pretty heavy. I don't anticipate it to move too much, but as I had mentioned off the air, one of the concerns would be siltation over the substrate that you're putting down. You really don't want it to get covered in mud. Fortunately, part of the location of this project will help mitigate some of that. So we're south of the Wolf River and west of bayou portage. So there should be some flow coming through those rivers as they exit that would hopefully alleviate some of the at least chronic siltation issues that you would expect to have.
Yeah, that's super cool. Super cool that you're pulling that off, and it will be great for local fishermen as they go out there and enjoy that large reef for sure. Anything else you want to say about that before we shift gears?
Yeah, so one of the benefits of creating the three-dimensional structure is it does provide a lot of habitat for invertebrates and smaller fish. So this is why it's going to be ideal for recreational fishers. It's also there are 5 public boat launches within 2 miles of the location. So accessibility was something else that we were wanting to promote for this project.
Yeah, that's really cool. Hey, listen, the last time we talked about the pilot program that you guys were launching around the oyster shell recycling program, working closely with local restaurants. Did you prove the concept on that?
There's been a little bit of some delay on that as far as contracting and getting a collection contractor lined up. So we haven't been able to get to restaurants yet to actually collect shell, but we have been reaching out. We enrolled to about 16 preliminarily into the program, which is a little bit above what we anticipated. It's just when you're using funds that come from the BP oil spill, there are lots of people who want to make sure that everything is done appropriately, and we're working our way through that process right now.
Well, good luck with it, because I think it has tremendous benefit, and I'm hoping that you guys can pull that together. Hey, listen, when you go to the website, there's so much work that you guys are doing. The Ocean and Coast Network. I'm just thinking of things that relate back to coastal Mississippi, the work that you're doing on the Gulf of Mexico in particular. Natural solutions for flooding, 10 years of progress in the Mississippi Gulf, on the Gulf of Mexico, natural solutions for coastal protection. In fact, you mentioned to me, as it relates to natural solutions for coastal protection, you've got some potentially large grant opportunities that might come together for you and your cohorts over in Alabama. Good luck with that. I hope that comes together.
Thank you. The recent introduction of funding through the Infrastructure Act was able to pass through NOAA and some other federal agencies, and we've been targeting those public funding sources for potential projects in Mississippi.
What's interesting about that, and I think it's one of the big points we can make, is that when people think about the Nature Conservancy, they think about going in and buying land and setting it aside for natural habitat and so on. Don't necessarily think about being involved in all these other programs that involve, getting federal dollars or private dollars or whatever the sources might be, state dollars, to do a number of different things. So Nature Conservancy has really evolved over the years, hasn't it, Tom?
Yeah, so we definitely have our roots into what you would call a land trust. Purchasing land, fee acquisition, easements, those types of strategies to set land aside for the natural benefits. But one of the things typically the Nature Conservancy is very cognizant of is to make sure people still have access to these lands. So we're not trying to protect land and put it in a box and keep people out of it. A lot of our projects here in Mississippi, we hand that land back over to the state. So a lot of the WMA in Pascagoula, for instance, TNC may have had a role in fee purchase of some of that land, but now it's available for hunting and other public activities through the state wildlife management system.
It comes up a lot on my outdoors program, the Mississippi River and the role that it plays here in Mississippi, the incredible diverse landscape and natural environment that it produces. And I noted that one of the things the Nature Conservancy has been involved with since 2020 is this Sentinel system program where they're doing monitoring from end to end of the Mississippi River. Are you involved in that at all?
Not so much, but I do know the folks who are a part of that. They're mostly out of our Louisiana chapter, and they're looking at different tools to better understand how water flows through the Gulf of Mexico from upstream, and largely how that impacts oyster resources across the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah. Mostly in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, I believe.
Well, listen, as I mentioned when we went to break, you think about the Pascagoula River and this incredible undammed waterway. You think about the Mississippi Sound, and hopefully the Save the Sound efforts will eventually lead to more conscious and thoughtful discussions from the Corps of Engineers to reduce the impact of Bonnet Carré openings. One of the things they've really scored some big victories there, in that the Mississippi Sound and the impact on Mississippi Sound has to be considered now. Before, it wasn't even being considered. And then you think about other options. We've always thought about the Bonnet Carré or the McGanser being the only two options, but what we've learned is that further north up the Mississippi River, there are other opportunities to take some of the pressure off. And all this is going to bode well for us in the future. That we think more carefully, instead of Mississippi Sound being this sacrificial lamb to save the city of New Orleans, that we're going to be more thoughtful in understanding how special this body of water really is and how much work we really need to do to protect it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good science happening right now with our state universities and collaborations that are going on in the coast, and having a better idea of those impacts to biological and habitat systems bodes well for at least understanding some of the impacts, and hopefully that filters upward. So.
Hey, so Tom, excuse me. Where do you come from? How did you land in this job? What is it that you sought out to do? And tell me a little bit about your path.
Sure. So I originally started going to graduate school at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, and when I was close to graduation, I ended up seeing a job posting for the Gulf Islands National Seashore, and I had been doing my graduate work there, so it seemed to be a natural fit. I ended up working for the Park Service on and off for about 5 years through their Division of Natural Resource Management. And then about the time of the oil spill, the Nature Conservancy started scaling up its coastal efforts. And I have to admit, I was pretty eager to leave the oil spill for the job that I have now. And that was a very good move on my part. And I've been working here for ever since. So it is kind of interesting being at the very start of something and seeing it through. And, a lot of the planning and work we did 13 years ago is now coming to form in some of the work that we're doing. So that's something to be proud of, I think.
So where did you grow up?
I'm originally from South Jersey.
Yeah, really?
I kind of grew up towards the Cape May Peninsula. So from a biology standpoint, I've always worked on barrier islands. And that's one of the reasons I came to Mississippi.
Hey, when we come back for the final segment, we'll continue our conversation with Tom Mohrman from the Nature Conservancy and see what else is going on in his world. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day. We're visiting with Tom Mohrman, who's the Marine Program Manager for Mississippi for the Nature Conservancy. And when we went to break, we were talking about where he came from. New Jersey. Coast of Mississippi is a long way from New Jersey. Do you get a chance to get back home?
I try to visit family at least once a year.
Yeah. So, Tom, did you come out of school wanting to get into marine sciences and that kind of world, or did you just kind of decide that along the way?
I think I would say I decided along the way, but I think like a lot of people who have careers in the outdoors, you get started by spending time in a particular area. You associate it with your friends and family and the place you grew up with. And for me, that was coastal New Jersey, not the part you stereotypically think about that's overcrowded, but more of the Back Bay areas where you go blue crab fishing. We were looking for bluefish and weakfish and stuff like that. So not so much the beach. I'm not a big fan of sand, to be honest with you. But I do love being in the Back Bays and being outside.
Well, when you mentioned you were involved with Gulf Islands National Seashore, that's a lot of sand. And back when I had the opportunity to partner with George Schloegel, God rest his soul, the former mayor of Gulfport and CEO of Hancock Whitney, we rebuilt the Ship Island Lighthouse from scratch. And we formed a nonprofit called the Friends of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. I was its first chairman. And we really worked hard back in those days to do good work there. But Man, we're so lucky to have that. I mean, it's one of the reasons that makes the Mississippi Sound what it is today, isn't it?
It absolutely is the southern border of the Mississippi Sound, and it creates that barrier that helps to regulate our freshwater and saltwater. But I loved my time out there. It's been a long time, but I had to walk those islands and map them many times, as well as do some bird monitoring and invasive species control and those sorts of things. But it is a really good asset, and I would encourage anybody to find a way to get out there and see it for yourselves if you haven't been there.
Tom, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, but we moved to Mississippi when I was 4. But before that, spent a little bit of time in Mobile and then Pensacola. Actually, we had a house on Pensacola Beach. And my grandparents worked there, had a beauty salon on Cervantes in Pensacola. So we spent our summers there for most of my younger life. I learned how to fish out on Pensacola Pier, and we spent a lot of time on that beach. And then, of course, as I got older, we spent a lot of time on Horn Island and Ship Island and whatever. But I've got that in my blood big time. We're so lucky to have that configuration. I love when Bobby Mahoney from Mahoney's Restaurants talks about the brown water of the Mississippi Sound and what it really means about shrimp and fish and crabs and the rich seafood industry that the French and Yugoslavian settlers who came here and Vietnamese settlers who came here, what they came to appreciate and admire about this great place. But it's something to preserve, isn't it?
Most definitely. And I think it's something we can preserve. It's within our abilities to protect these areas. And, even as individuals, when we go and visit them, it's just a matter of respecting the area and taking good care of it like our parents used to. So.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Alex Littlejohn, who no longer works as the head of the Mississippi Nature Conservancy, I had a chance to get to know him really, really well. He went off to a really big job at Weyerhaeuser. But he was a terrific leader in Mississippi. Do you ever get a chance to touch base with him, Tom?
I've talked to him a couple times off and on. It sounds like he's doing well, and we definitely think his position in Weyerhaeuser is well earned and deserved. And I don't have a whole lot to do with our forest program, so my interactions professionally with him are very few and far between. But we definitely like seeing him whenever we get a chance to.
Yeah, man, listen, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at all when he got that big job. He was a young man with so much potential, and his ability to network. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of miles he put on his car traveling across the state, meeting with donors and others that were involved in the Nature Conservancy. But his role was rewarded because it prepared him well for the position that he's in now, and he seems to really be enjoying that. I'm proud of the Nature Conservancy and the work that you do, and I'm really thrilled that they've got a coastal program. And as you continue to do things that are going to build reefs and coastal protection and other efforts here along the Gulf Coast. Seems like you're pretty dedicated to your work and don't have a plan to go anywhere anytime soon other than stay here and contribute, right?
Well, right now it's a really good time to be in the restoration business for coastal resources. There's a lot of federal and state opportunity out there to get funding to direct at good projects. We're very appreciative of the legislation and continuing to support the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Fund. And, those dollars help us to go and target bigger banks of money. And, a small project amount for something through that program could be leveraged many times fold if we're smart about what we target.
No doubt about it. Tom, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. This has been Tom Mohrman from the Nature Conservancy. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.